Well, do you think if you have an Oscar and are an awesome actor, you have the right then to talk to world leaders about how they should run their companies or countries? I'm surprised that Clayton put this in the show because he loves Leonardo DiCaprio and he loves Leonardo DiCaprio movies. But Leonardo DiCaprio has
Same.
started a Twitter fight with Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro about the Amazon. So the tweet in question is Leonardo DiCaprio pointing out deforestation in the Amazon. He says, here's the tweet, "It is one of the most important places on the planet for people and wildlife. According to this map, the region has faced an onslaught of illegal deforestations at the hands of extractive industry over the last 3 years," which is true. We've covered this on the show that deforestation harms native peoples, it harms land, all kinds of negative things. But the president of Brazil did not take kindly to this Twitter slap. He says, "You again, Leo. This way you will become my best electoral cable," as we say in Brazil. "I could tell you again to give up your yacht before lecturing the world, but I know progressives, you want to change the entire world but never look at yourselves, so I will let you off the hook." So he points out, and the rest of us now have a look at how Leonardo DiCaprio vacations on this super yacht, right, that burns about 300 gallons of diesel fuel
Yeah, take a
per
look at
hour.
this. This is a tweet here that we have. It's someone firing back, like, because we always see these videos of Leonardo DiCaprio out on a yacht.
Yes.
Like during the summer, he's always in like Ibiza or someplace. And here is the tweet with him. There it is. Civilized Beast tweets, Leonardo DiCaprio, "A climate around your fakeness is changing rapidly." This is Leonardo DiCaprio aboard his mega yacht that burns about 300 gallons of diesel fuel per hour. He wants you to know that you're not taking climate change seriously enough.
Hey, we don't know
Yes.
if that's vegetable diesel, though. Come on now.
Oh, yeah, it could be just like the same thing that
It could be.
powers the DeLorean in Back to the Future,
He
too,
could be pulling
right?
up. Yeah, he could be pulling up to the Burger King on the shore and getting all of their grease out of their grease pits. So come on, we can't judge until we know the facts.
But I love these celebrities. I mean, yes, I like Leonardo DiCaprio movies. I think he's an amazing actor, but that's where it ends.
One of the
for me.
best.
Like, I don't need to hear him like, you know, like, with these political tweets like this. So let's unpack this a little bit because he's again, this is one of those countries where the United States has tried to install its own leaders, right? It's tried to stick its nose into its politics, and as Bolsonaro points out, we preserve more than 80% of our native vegetation. We have the cleanest energy among G20 nations. It's also clear, he says, that you don't know my government announced a new commitment to eradicate illegal deforestation by 2028, not by 2030, as most countries, or maybe you do know that, but for some reason pretend to be ignorant. I hope you're not getting too much for this role, he says.
Yes. And so, this sort of it relates to something that Clayton and we both read this book called False Alarm this week about how the government likes to say that it's combating climate change, but it's really doing that in ways that are giving itself more power, giving more money to corporations that already have it, and enacting policies that are harming poor people first and foremost. So, when people who are wealthy and privileged can sort of punch around about virtuous things that they think should not happen, like deforestation, right? What they're actually, and then they have this sort of rebound effect where it's like, I can use reusable bags and use a reusable water bottle, but then the things that you do around you, like it's what's the name? It's a rebound effect, right? And so you think like, oh, I'm doing some good things and not others. It's virtue signaling by telling, other policies and other politicians what they should do when you don't really understand the economics of what would happen then if all deforestation stopped tomorrow, right? Who would be hurt? Not Leonardo DiCaprio, but a lot of poor people. And so it's interesting when you put this in the context, he's not an economist, right? And I'm not saying that deforestation should continue. I'm not for it either. But these are just sort of unproductive Twitter fights.
Right. And this book is really fascinating because it points out the hypocrisy in the media. You have The Guardian, for instance, telling its newspaper staff, telling its writers that you can't use the term climate change any longer. From now on, all of your writing, if you refer to the climate, it needs to say climate crisis. Like, we need to scare you about it, right? We need to terrify you about it. And that needs to be all of the writing. I literally saw a headline today that was like, the world is going to end in 10 years. Like, we can't stop it. Like, the floods are coming. Like, we see these, just read any story about Kentucky flooding right now. And the media is always going to just shove in a sentence floods in Kentucky, thanks to climate change. It's like, no, floods actually happen. It's maybe not necessarily because of climate change that a flood happens.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that we should all be careful with this. And I absolutely have been guilty on this. I think that anybody who's watched this show can rewind the tape and have me talking about like doing whatever green thing, right? But this is something that this author, Bjorn Lundberg, calls moral licensing. He says this pattern may be familiar to anyone who's struggled with dieting. If you're making good progress on your diet, you're more likely to choose a chocolate bar over an apple as a snack than someone who is struggling with their diet, right? So this effect is copiously documented when it comes to environmentally friendly behavior. People who have just donated to a charity are less likely to behave in an environmentally friendly way after. Those who have reduced their water consumption through awareness use more electricity instead. So, it's just ridiculous for us to think that our behavior gives us this moral license to tell other people how to live, when really the solutions to the climate problem are going to come, although Leonardo DiCaprio has it right, at the government level and at the corporate level, not necessarily through our individual behaviors, and certainly not because we put something on Twitter.
Right.
Well, and we can't really be thinking about climate change right now because we have to get Ukraine back to a democracy first.
Oh, we have to blow things up all over the place.
Yeah,
there.
right. Yeah,
the deforestation there is okay.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
the other because I love the hypocrisy piece of this, right? Like, I can like Leonardo DiCaprio, and I will still put him on my show because I can't stand hypocrisy, right? So put him on here on the show and talk about it. These same guys, though, that have these Ukrainian flag Twitter handles, right? Or they'll do a concert for Ukraine or whatever. So the amount of carbon dioxide and emissions that come from war and the military-industrial complex dwarfs everything else in the world, right? So you can't hold a candle. So the one guy who is running his faucet a little too much in California cannot hold a candle to the amount of carbon dioxide and devastation that is being caused by the U.S. military.
Yeah, and think about like what we were doing over there with those burn piles. We burn everything, like all the plastics, everything that is sent over there. We put in big burn piles and burn, and like people are coming back with cancer and all kinds of things, breathing that in, because we obviously, and that's Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. We obviously do not think that there is a climate crisis if we continue to do things like that.
Well, also, research shows that countries that do better economically stop deforestation because they don't need to do it anymore. They don't need that money they don't need to boost their economy in that way. So, sort of poking at someone for economic choices on Twitter does not permanent change make, right? And so it's easy for someone like Leonardo DiCaprio or me to say, well, I don't buy foods with palm oil because it supports deforestation, which is a behavior that I have said many times on this show. But at the same time, I have to think about, if there was no deforestation, if these industries didn't exist, if poor people could not get cheap energy, who would hurt? Them, not me, right? And so for me to say things like that is extremely selfish. And I just want to avoid making those kind of statements any longer when if you realize that it will disproportionately harm disenfranchised people.
Yeah. So let us know your thoughts on this. Again, I don't mind people speaking out about it, but it's the woke way in which they do it, right? So they're happy to call out Brazil, but they can't call out what's going on in their own state, in California, or on the mega yacht that they're riding around in while they're calling probably typing a tweet out about Brazil while on the back of a mega yacht,
Right.
burning 300 gallons of
And
diesel
there
fuel.
actually is more environmental progress that you would think. And, you know, as countries get wealthier and stop deforestation, will we report on that? Because it happens, right?
Right.
As countries get wealthier and people stop burning fossil fuels to cook and stop dying from burning fossil fuels in enclosed spaces, will we report on that, right? This is sort of a bigger discussion about how the media makes you, you know, tells you only the bad stories about climate change and not necessarily the good stories. And so, you know, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. What Leonardo DiCaprio
and as an
can say on
atheist,
Twitter.
As an atheist, I always like to pull out this Bible verse that says, take the log out of your own eye before you take the twig out of somebody else's.
Yeah.
Because we've all got logs in our eyes.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be
Sure.
great? It wouldn't it be great too if Leonardo DiCaprio, he was a big Biden supporter, right? I mean, if you want to call out trouble with climate, you want to call out the United States' hypocrisy on climate, tell them to get out of any support of Ukraine right now. Get out of Ukraine, get out of military, end the 9 wars that the United States is currently in. That might do a lot to reduce the amount of devastation around the world. You know, allow the people in Syria to have access to their own grain that we just stole.
Right.
Or let the Syrians have access to their own oil so there's not rampant poverty and famine. How about that as an idea? Leo could speak out about that.
Well, in fact, he was the voice of the Rolling Stone documentary Before the Flood. Oh, no, it had nothing to do with Rolling Stone. It was a documentary called Before the Flood, a 2016 sort of climate change documentary, was voiced by Leonardo DiCaprio. You know, talked a lot about global flooding, the polar bears, that kind of thing. The research by Bjorn Lundberg points out that polar bears are actually back in a big way because of human intervention. It was not because they are not surviving climate change. They are. It's because humans stopped hunting them. And they have had a resurgence in population. We're not saying climate change is not real, not at all. Absolutely, we believe that, right? But if we focus on like just these pieces of it that keep us scared, then we continue to hand power to people who will continue to make money and gain power from it rather than real solutions.
Right. The green agenda, which just, you know, further makes these companies billions and billions of dollars. And it makes us feel like we're guilty. You know, it's our fault. So
I mean, I think it's
to these guys.
for on us, you know, in the media to tell you like what change is good at the same time as what change is bad, rather than live in this sort of fear-based place, which is, I'm going to say, where I have lived a lot over the last decade, and I'm not going to do that anymore.
You know how many
you guys.
CFL? You know how many CFL light bulbs I bought during that whole? It's like I replaced every light bulb in my house with the CFL, but that ended up not being as good as LED.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, so I ended up with all these light bulbs that ended up not being good because I followed their agenda. I was like, oh, I believe in this.
But LED is what you're supposed to buy. Why would
Well,
you?
no,
it is now. Yeah.
CFL was the one in between. It was the curly ones.
Oh, yes.
Remember, we were like, you got to get rid of those, and it was going to give you 5 years, and you got to stop using those, right? And think about those industries that made bank off of it. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it's the thing. It's if you just think about like, if you just take a step back and you want to follow the money, right? Just if you just pay attention to where the money goes with these guys, like why are they pushing these massive agendas? This massive bill that's going through Congress right now, it's supposed to be combating inflation. Almost half of it goes to climate and climate related items. Okay, so it's supposed to be an inflation bill. One we wrote about in the newsletter today that Congress is working on, right? It's supposed to battle inflation, and yet almost half of it is about climate. Okay.
Well, and also,
members of Congress like to try to spin it that this is going to literally is going to help you right now by reducing, trying to get to like a carbon neutral position. That's going to help you pay more less on your groceries right now. Does that make any sense? Not at all.
Well, and when people are saying like there's a certain narrative out there that you're listening to, and somebody says a counter narrative, don't just always write that narrative off. Look into it a little bit. Because like if people were willing to look into things a little bit more, and I understand it's hard, there's a lot of information coming at you, but don't just write everything off that you hear as conspiracy theory. Because if
Yeah.
you do that, then your mind's always going to be closed to the potential that something is. So there's people that have been out here hollering the truth this whole time, and a lot of people didn't listen to them, and they've been marginalized. You got to ask, when the government starts marginalizing people that sound like they know what they're talking about, then something's not right. So don't be afraid to listen to a different narrative.
When you have these prepper channels that have been like, YouTube has been taking them down and blocking them. And it's like, so there's people that are literally, growing their own food and prepping to take care of their own families, right? And this is a concern of people like Bill Gates, who are buying up all the farmland in the United States. This is a concern to the corporatists who don't want you to own your own land, want you to eat bugs and you'll be happy. Like, you have to wonder what's going on. Look at the Dutch farmers.
Even police handbooks. Well, I was going to say police handbooks specifically say to look for people who are preppers, who carry a constitution, who have third-party candidate bumper stickers. Like, that's in a police handbook to watch out for those people.